Hey, Scuttlebutt listeners. Welcome to episode 245. This week, we welcome Josh Bates to the Scuttlebutt. Josh is a retired Marine infantry officer, podcaster, and author of the book Baghdad Shuffle, a noir crime thriller set in the backdrop of the 2003 invasion of Iraq. It goes without saying that this is a genre-bending story. Josh talks to us about his path to the Yellow Footprints, serving with his dad, the impetus for writing a book that centers on a geopolitical murder mystery, and how his personal experiences in Iraq shaped the plot of Baghdad Shuffle. One topic Josh shares with us is his experience in getting a book on the shelves, air quotes, and the current state of publishing. It was really interesting to get his perspective on veterans entering the literary world. Also, you can check out more of Josh on the Green Door podcast, where veterans, innovators, and creatives share stories that bind the battlefield, intelligence, industry, innovation, and creativity. This is episode 245. Hey, Scuttlebutt listeners. Thank you for joining us and your continued support. I'm Vic. I'm here with William.
Howdy, y'all.
And Nancy.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
Yeah, I mean, we got all three of us in the same hobby, and the car's getting a little full. It's normally a two-seater, so we went from we went from Maverick and Goose to Maverick, Goose, and Jester, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and we're really honored and really excited to be welcoming Lieutenant Colonel retired Josh Bates to the show. Sir, thank you for being here.
Yeah, team. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I know for our listeners, obviously you can't see it, but Josh has already become my favorite guest we've had because he's wearing his Padres cap.
I knew this was going to happen. I've been waiting for you to say something, Vic.
You know me so well.
Yeah.
But it was an instant like, oh, you're my fave. Also a University of San Diego grad, which I was going to be a torero when I left high school, so it feels like coming home. It's like getting in a nice warm bath and putting on your old bath. I mean, it just feels very home right now.
Yeah, the Friar Faithful, we're spread out far and wide. So not a lot of us, but we definitely cover a pretty huge geographic expanse there.
Yeah, thankfully. Actually, just real quick, the podcast actually should be called Sidebars, but they're coming to town. They'll be in DC the end of this month, and so I think nice. I'm going to take my kids to go watch, and hopefully they can figure out how to produce some offense before we get there. But yeah, so we're looking forward to that here in a few weeks. But anyway, so sir, you are, as I stated, you're a retired lieutenant colonel, infantry Marine, intelligence Marine. And you're also an author, Marine author. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you for joining us all the way in Hawaii. Now, I normally call the 21 area of Camp Pendleton God's country. So maybe we call Hawaii Eden. I'm not sure, but thank you for joining us from paradise.
Yeah, for sure. So, I was actually born in North County, actually at Camp Pendleton Naval Hospital. And so, that's also near and dear to my heart, but Hawaii, we still have better ways here on Oahu, and it's just this is home.
Yeah. Before we started recording, we talked about how deliberate the decision for you to end up there is, and I definitely want to touch on that. But as you mentioned about being born at the Naval Hospital there, which, by the way, have you seen that it's not out by Lake O'Neill? It's now pretty much right out the back, the front gate there.
Yeah. I've been back a couple times in
recent
years, so
yeah, it was wonderful facility. But so what was your path to the Yellow Footprints then? Because clearly you're a Marine brat. What was your journey as a young man before pinning on your EGA?
Yeah, so like I said, kind of born into the gig. My pops was a machine gunner in Vietnam, the Gulf 25. Got wounded a bunch of times, was out for like 8 years, and then came back in as an officer after he'd gone to college and whatnot. Met my mom at school and stuff. So by the time that I came around, I think he was like a first lieutenant or something. So the family unit was already running strong. And weirdly, he never really tried to pressure me into the Marine Corps or anything. It was just something that I was actually back here in Hawaii, maybe my junior year of high school, skateboarding down Kapiolani Avenue, popped into the recruiter because it was like right there. and came home that night and he's like, oh shit, like you didn't sign anything, did you? What's going on? And like everybody's got the recruiting stories from hell, but like I still remember Sergeant Tomaselli was my guy. I guess he like had already made quota that month or whatever, but he was like, hey, like you think about going to college, and he actually pushed me over to the OSO and that's when I found out about. I didn't
It
know
usually
that,
goes the other way, right?
right, exactly, yeah. I didn't know that NRTC scholarships existed. So they kind of schooled me up on that, and I applied and got it. So then, yeah, I was off to University of San Diego there for 4 years. It was the old Semper Fi, poli sci, at the bare minimum to like, to graduate from there, and then off to, well, actually, so the way the NRTC thing works is, as you're probably familiar, like you're supposed to go to OCS after your junior year, and then you get commissioned after you graduate.
Yeah.
I got in some trouble for quite a few alcohol related incidents there, and actually got put on leave of absence from the unit for a bit. So I ended up having to like skip my college graduation and then just like haul ass out to Quantico to go to OCS. But made it through, and then yeah, off to TBS infantry officers course, and then out to 1-7 in Twin Nine Palms.
So what was it? Just one too many trips over to Fred's?
Yeah,
There in Old Town?
there was there was quite a few. In fact, I think I still might hold the record for the most midshipman review boards and actually getting commissioned, at least for University of San Diego. So
Yeah.
not something that goes on the CV, but definitely a for the youngins out there, like it can be done.
Yeah.
Check yourself and stay true to the stay true to course, and you might make it through. But yeah, so got that out of my, and again, that was also back when Northern Baja was like sketchy fun, not like
Mhm.
sketchy. The cartels hadn't really started, they
Yeah.
didn't really shit where they eat back then. So a lot of shenanigans down in Mexico, which thank God never like matriculated back up to the staff at the unit there. But yeah, it was just kind of the 90s, it was wild, carefree, really
Gen
fun.
X.
Yeah, exactly. So just definitely lived that dream. USD didn't suck. It was like at that time it was like 60-40 or maybe even 70-30 like female, because it used to be all women's college. So
Mhm.
that was an added bonus. Yeah, beautiful setting, a place I've never been able to afford to go without the scholarship. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was great.
So just going back to your dad, so did he end up being a grunt officer as well?
Yeah, he did. And then so so we came out here in the late 80s. Back in the day, the Marine Air Groups used to have what they called a group grunt, which was kind of
Mhm.
like a mix between like being like a FAC-A and just kind of like an advisor, right? So when he was a pretty junior major, he got sent out to Mag 24, that was here in Kaneohe Bay,
Okay.
as the group grunt. And then he transitioned, became the XO of 1-3, went to Desert Storm with them. Came back, then we had to go back to Quantico for a little while, and then came back out here when I was in high school, and that's when he was the CO23, was at the regiment for a bit, and then Mark 4 Pack, just grinded in like the G3 and G5 for a while.
Yeah, dying a little bit every day. So you spent some time here in Northern Virginia then as well. Your dad was at Quantico. So how old were you when you were out here?
Yeah, back and forth. So the first time, I guess, actually went to kindergarten at Ripon Elementary there up
Oh,
in
no
like
way.
Dale City, I think. I don't know where it is, somewhere up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he came out. That was back when it was still AWS. So
Okay.
he was out there. This is like 82 or something.
Hmm.
And then yeah, so then he came back for command and staff. They were all like kind of like 1 year hits for the most part.
I see.
And then for the last time when I was in high school, he was the three at the basic school. So we were actually out there and I think at like warfighting lab or something, some other B billet type thing. So we were actually out there for like three years at that point. But then
Okay.
I came, so that was my up through my sophomore year of high school. I went to Potomac, there, or as we called it, Lorton South at the time, because that place was run like a penitentiary. But then yeah, came back, came back to Hawaii, finished up here, and then off to USD.
And
That's
so
awesome.
what did your family say when you were commissioned? How did they feel? You said earlier you weren't encouraged, to choose that path, but what was the reaction?
Yeah, well, they were really happy that I had a job. I think that was I think they
Relatable.
knew, right. They knew from jump that like I wasn't going to be the guy with like the hard science background to jump in on the .com boom or anything like that. Like that, that just was not in the cards. Yeah, so I think they were just stoked that I had found something that I liked and was all in. And it was a natural fit. Like growing up in the Corps, like it was, in fact, my first company commander had been a platoon commander when my dad in 2-3 when my dad was the battalion. So it was just like this like crazy incestuous small world, like know everybody. My battalion commander in OIF 1 at 1-7, Lieutenant Colonel Collin at the time, Colonel Collin when he retired. He had been a company commander in 1-3 with my dad in Desert Storm. So it was just like just couldn't get away from it. Just like knew all
Yeah.
all the same players. Yeah, exactly. So which can be good and bad. So it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you obviously got to like make sure you're not always people watching. There's no anonymity at that point.
Yeah, no, that is true. It is the you just gained 10,000 uncles.
Exactly. Exactly.
So what was that like then at TBS? I mean, was grunt like you're just going to be an infantryman, or were you sort of
Yeah,
feeling it? Okay.
that was the thing. And I was in Fox Company, right, which is like in the wintertime. And so
Yeah.
it was like all, the whole like summer from the school halls, winter from the pool hall. It was all like uh MECEPs mostly. So it was all prior enlisted guys that at that time, like infantry years are like dog years. So like, you've been spent 4 years in the infantry, like biologically, okay, maybe you're like 24 or whatever, but like your body feels like a 70. So like none of those guys wanted infantry. And I didn't really know, like I had no exposure really to any of their MOSs. I mean, I knew you could be like a, aviation contract or whatever, but like all the intel stuff, had no idea. I was just like, whatever, like, actually, Trax was my number 2. I figured like,
Nice.
hey, at least they'll keep me on the beach.
Yeah,
And then
exactly. That's what switched
yeah,
me over.
exactly. So no, it was just infantry, Trax, tanks, and I was just like, if I get anything other than that, like, I'll bounce as soon as I can. But yeah, it was just a very ignorant. But yeah, my SBC actually told me maybe like 2 months into it, he was like, yeah, don't worry, man. He's like, you're going infantry. So it was so that was yeah, I guess fortunate in the fact that I wasn't competing with a lot of hard chargers coming out of college whose bodies were still like intact and ready to go. So I don't even know where I came out like in the quality spread. In fact, I think I might have been like bottom of the top third, which can be dangerous.
Yeah, that is
But
dangerous.
yeah, but either way, it worked out. Yeah, like I said, he told me well before. Yeah, I think you get your MOS like what, like 4.5 months in or something. And we were probably like 7-8 weeks in. He was like, "Yeah, you're going infantry." So,
Yeah, they actually had to graduate us early. We ended up with 5 track slots. And I joke about this, but I think it's actually true. Like I was in the top of the bottom third. So it was like first choice, baby. And then they actually graduated us early to get to track school. 'Cause, like I was alpha. And so we were
okay.
graduating in June. And I think track school started the first week of June. So they're like, all right, you guys
You
gotta
gotta
go.
go. Yeah. It's the same with us. We started IOC like before TPS finished, so we were kind of doing both, and which always
Mhm.
sucked because like everybody else is like kind of going into party mode, graduation mode, and then we're like we're still cleaning weapons for the next 7 hours. But yeah, no, it was good. IOC was great. I got to actually do it like 1.5 times because during the first go around I got kidney stones. You can only
Oh,
miss like one. You can only miss one
Oh
training day, right?
no.
Yeah, so like they sent me up to Bethesda, and then so I missed like 2 or 3 days. So they're like, "Yeah, you're getting rolled back." So,
oh,
yeah, so I got
brutal.
got the double dose of that one, but yeah, it was great. It was a great experience. That's a great school.
Yeah, I've looked back. I mean, obviously, I just turned 50, so I mean, like my motivation level is much lower even than it was back then. But I do wonder about it, especially when I hear, obviously we spend so much time with the grunts. It's just like, I wonder what that would have been like. I remember we were on the beach after having done our first like full on like unit level amphibious landing, and like we had the plenums up, and we would take a picture of all of us just sort of like laid out on the beach, and then sent it to all our friends at IOC as like a postcard and said like "Indoc was tough. Hope you guys are doing it."
Yeah,
But so I don't. I think we had very similar experiences. But you were in Iraq for the invasion.
yeah, which was great. And I was actually I'd already been in the fleet for about a year and a half at that point, maybe almost 2 years. And it was great timing because we'd done a UDP in 2002 together out to Okinawa. So like, we lost a couple of like the senior first lieutenants and stuff, but the core unit of all the
Yeah.
NCOs and everything, we had all those guys, right? So like we'd already been together for a while. when we shipped out to Kuwait in January of '03, I think.
Okay.
So we already had a pretty tight, cohesive unit, like definitely down. Like I said, all the NCOs and staff NCOs were already there and like locked in. So that really kind of made all the difference. And
Yeah.
then and then plus I had fleeted up from a rifle company. I was in Suicide Charlie, and then by the time the war kicked off, I had moved up to be a cat platoon commander in weapons company, which was like the best job in the Marine Corps at the
Yeah.
time because I'm just like no adult supervision, way forward of
Way
the
forward.
battalion, and yeah, so it was like the kind of motorized reconnaissance thing slash just one long movement to contact, so
Yeah.
it was great.
Yeah, my
So-
buddy
so-
was
so-
the scouts platoon commander for when he was with tanks, and same thing. Like they're just
Yeah,
out running around with 50 cals and tow missiles, just praying.
yeah, it was awesome. It was everything, like because the first couple of weeks of that were like a quasi conventional, force on force type thing, like 51st Mech Division, all that we went up against, and it was like actually doing stuff that like you learned like in IOC, like even weird things like sometimes getting so far forward of the battalion that doing the old like field expedient whip to do like HF like shots back to like stuff that I never would when they were teaching us, like, oh man, like this day and age, like we're never gonna use that, and then sure enough we did, so it was good.
So Josh,
Right-
can we
right
rewind a
place,
little bit?
Yeah.
What was your thought process as you're going into this? Obviously, what was your thought process? You're in the military when 9/11 happens, and then all of a sudden you're going to war. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so for me, I felt actually really prepared, and we always talk about the whole no plan survives first contact type of thing, and like our objective on day one of the war was we were really kind of like the leading edge there going in. We had to secure this oil facility called Azerbaijan, which is like way down south, like west of Basra. And the fear was obviously that the Iraqis were going to sabotage it, kind of like they did in '91, right? So wait till we got in there and then blow the entire thing, and then you had this huge like Exxon Valdez level like environmental catastrophe. So and weirdly, we were also providing security for some CIA like ground branch dudes that were going in to snatch a guy like out of there at the same time. So it was like this kind of mix of like, okay, there's a lot of moving parts. Like this is probably not going to go as planned, but it did. It was like it actually kind of like through most of that first day, up until that night, the plan kind of actually worked. And I was like, okay, that's encouraging. The fact that, and then things kind of like, as they do, the chaos kind of took over, and we had to make a bunch of audibles after that. But that was a good, really, I felt like I said, I'd already been in the fleet for a while at this point. All the boys in the platoon, like we had worked together for a while. I felt comfortable with that. But we were still getting drops like in Kuwait days before like we crossed the line. So we no kidding had Marines that were coming out of like SOI and joining and they were still shitting Pendleton chow while they're like, joining the platoon, and then within like hours, days, I guess, they're in combat. So really, if you look at like those guys, like their high school to combat timeline was maybe like 4 or 5 months. Like that's, that's a much different gig than at that point, having done, 4 years of ROTC and TBS and IOC and, a unit deployment program. Like I felt much more prepared for it. And I was also really fortunate that I was dealt like a great hand, right? So like all my vehicle commanders, all my NCOs, I didn't have a platoon sergeant. We lost our staff sergeant before the invasion. So I really had like a 20-year-old corporal that was basically, filling that role. But yeah, he was super locked on. So yeah, I was dealt a good hand for all the small unit leaders were on point, and that made it relatively easy.
Yeah. You said you'd been in the fleet for a minute at that point. I guess just to continue to rewind. So both you and I then must have come up about the same time. I hit the fleet, I think, in '99 officially.
Yeah, I got commissioned in 2000, and then I got to the fleet in like mid 2000, but pre 9/11. Actually, I was actually out here in Hawaii, like on leave post IOC when 9/11 happened.
Oh God, no kidding.
Yeah. So I had to like that was interesting because I kind of begged my XO to like, hey man, there's just no flights coming. I can't get off the island. Like you got to extend my leave a little bit, but it all worked out.
No, that's insane. I had actually just come back from Vietnam, so my family we made a trip out, and I was out there for like 2 weeks, and that was August.
Okay.
And then my buddy joined, kind of like you were saying, like came to our unit right after like I think it was September, like Labor Day, so early first weekend of September. I mean, he'd been with us. He had just taken over my platoon. I fleeted up to be the XO, and then we got attacked. And I just want to get some of your perspective because I actually signed the contract in '97 during Clinton. The idea of like doing anything other than a MEU was insane. Like you were hard as woodpecker lips if you did like a humanitarian assistance thing off of a MEU. So the whole 9/11 thing was just completely blew my, and I was at Pendleton too. So everyone was afraid that, San Onofre was going to be attacked and, LAR's mobile. It was fucking nuts. Like we were, you try, sending tracks up to block the waterway, LAR's over there. It was crazy, man.
Yeah, it is funny when you look at that generation, right? Like where the kind of the threshold for being like a salty bastard was, right? Like, I mean, we had this one guy like at IOC that had been like in the '92 LA riots, and that, he might as well have been in Iwo Jima as far as we were concerned. That was like, so it was like just like the threshold for what was considered, action back then was certainly different. But yeah, you're right. That was kind of like the best you could hope for was, maybe some, like, there's always some uppity factions in the Balkans that might pop off or something like
Right.
that. Like, but so yeah, no. So like when 9/11, I mean, I think there was a pretty, so I was delayed here on leave en route back to 29 Palms, and then when I finally got back there, we went to the field for like a month or whatever. Did like a CAX or two CAX, like maybe back to back. I'm not sure, but like that whole time, everybody was talking like something's popping off, and of course at that time we thought it was Afghanistan. This was before the whole kind of like Iraq master plan had started kind of filtering down through the rumit channels at that point. So yeah, exactly. So Iraq was definitely not really, that was not on the radar until I would say probably that summer of 2002. We were UDP, in Oki, and then actually my company was up on the DMZ in Korea, and I think that's the first time I remember hearing people start kind of whispering like, "Hey, might be doing this other thing." Don't get your hopes set on Afghanistan. So yeah, that was that was kind of the mindset going into it. It's like we knew something was going down, we just didn't really know where.
Yeah, man, that's nuts. So all right, so we were there at the same time. I think where you guys were going out to oil field, they shot us up to Qasar. We ended up having that like overnight battle at the bridge that went into Basra. It was nuts. I remember starting it off, pulling off the line, and then I got a couple of hours of rack time. I woke up and they were still trying to cross the bridge. I mean, it was like 50 armored vehicles have been destroyed at that point. And I'm like, they're still trying to come off. This is crazy. Anyhow, but your time though in Iraq, I guess both times, right? Because you end up going back again. Were you part of Phantom Fury or around?
No, so yeah, when I got to Fallujah, that wasn't until 2006, and I'd already lab moved into Intel at that point. So like really my memories of Fallujah are just being stuck in a skiff, right? So just like the little windowless box. Like very rarely did I ever get outside the wire on that one. But yeah, so
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, so I was like that. So really, like most of the Iraq that informs the novel is obviously all from the push up to Baghdad, and then a little bit later. So we left Baghdad and then pushed back down to Najaf, and then we were there for a long time as well.
You're right.
Which that was so kind of monkey with the chronology and kind of take a lot of like the first act of the novel, the Baghdad Shuffle, that all takes place in Iraq. Let's say probably 85-90% of all that stuff and things that happened to me, but just condensed for narrative purposes and pacing purposes. But
yeah, so what was that about? What was it about that time then? Because we were at the Rashid Military Academy, and I remember
remember that place.
It was interesting. I remember they're like, we were getting ready to go in, and they're like, yeah, no, they put the students out like to try to repel your guys. I'm like, what the? And of course, as soon as we shoot, they just take off running. And it was like, so they're like, oh, hey, we got a nice little compound for us to hang out in. Anyways, but yeah, it was a crazy time. They took our tracks away from us, and then they had us, basically motorized, and it was just absolute. So, what was it for you then, with that time period that we were like, oh man, like this, there's a book here, or I need to write this down, or was it now, now that we're, 2 decades removed, you're like, oh, this was a thing that can, like, there was a lot more here that I've been able to sort of dissect and digest.
Yeah, it was the criminal element, right? That's what
Okay.
really stuck out at the time. So that was, I'd grown up, I'd been a huge like crime fiction fan, like massive like, James Ellroy fanboy and like all that kind of mid-century like hard-boiled, profane, cop stuff. Like that was really kind of my wheelhouse. And I remember like in Baghdad, looking back on other than just being like hungry and sleepy all the time, I kind of loved it because it was lawless, right? It was just wild. All the way the push up to Baghdad, we've been mostly shooting guys that were wearing camis or like,
Hmm.
they're Iraqi army uniforms.
Yeah, they're
and
in armored vehicles.
SRG.
They've got
Exactly. Yeah, it was like a little bit more.
standard stuff.
But then by the time we got into the city, and in fact, our very first objective, like I remember we got diverted. We were supposed to push out to take that little peninsula where like the Baghdad University is right there on the Tigris. And as we were pushing in there, we got diverted to Tariq Aziz's house. And so we rolled in. I mean, we just must have barely missed that bastard because like there was still like, quasi warm food on the counter. And like, I mean, we literally just missed the guy. So that was yeah, so that was cool. And then and then pretty much right away, just like all the looting and stuff popped off. And then the event that really inspired it was maybe 2 or 3 days in the city. We had teamed up with some Iraqi cops. Again, completely unvetted. Just these guys, kind of one of them had like some broken English, approached to us like, "Hey, we need some help." And we're like, "Cool, that's good." So it was just kind of like patrol indefinitely and look for action. And we got tipped off that there was a bank robbery in progress, and it was right down there in central Baghdad. And cruised in, and no shit, these guys were trying to like breach the bank with like RPGs to get into the vault. And so we, big gunfight there, and just it was wild. And I remember thinking at the time, like, oh, this is like the stuff that I used to read about, but like kind of like volume 211 style.
Yeah, right.
So that was kind of the at the time I didn't really know that like if that bank actually contained any of the like oil for food money skim that had come out of that program or anything like that. And I just knew that there was like a lot of like illicit hard currency like in the city, and the regime heavies didn't get all of it out in time, right? So there was still like a lot left back in the coffers. So when Saddam and Uday and Qusay and all those guys bounced out with the whole Takriti clan, like there was still a lot of money left back in the kitty. So and I imagine that's what these guys were going after. They had been tipped to it. So that's actually the photo that's on the cover of Baghdad Shuffle, that's actually me. At that, like it was either the day of, or maybe that might have been like I think that was actually a few hours after that bank robbery. As we jammed up some guys that we thought were potentially responsible, which turns out, if my memory serves, I don't think they actually were. But that was kind of the so just the drama and the chaos of it, and the fact that combat zones are like they're very fertile ground for all kinds of criminal capers. I was like, that's, I read a lot of crime fiction. I read a lot of military thrillers. There's very few books that kind of combine the two. So that was kind of the sweet spot that I was swinging for with the Baghdad Shuffle.
Oh, go ahead, Nancy.
No, I was just gonna ask, is writing something that you had was that a goal you always had, that you were gonna write? Did you just sort of write for fun? Were you a journal keeper?
Yeah, well, yeah, I was a huge reader first, right? So like that was kind of I don't have any formal like literature education or anything. That was just like I like to read, and it was again mostly kind of 20th century like crime stuff. But I knew that would make a great story, and then obviously like life kind of got in the way. Well, one, I was like, there's not a lot of novelists under like 40 that write good books. There's a few, but for every like Bret Easton Ellis that can knock one out at like 21, there's a bunch of others that just write stuff that like I don't want to bother with. So I knew I needed some more living, and I needed some more perspective kind of on the events. But so it kind of had stayed in the back of my mind for a long time. And then, ultimately that helped because by the time I actually sit down to, after I retired, went to grad school, got done. And then when I sat down to kind of knock this one out, like it came really fast. I think I had the first draft ready to send out to publishers in like 100 days, maybe. Which
you son of a bitch. I'm on 7 years.
Yeah, it's so but I guess because I've been kind of like stewing on that story for a long time, right? So I'd kind of already mentally mapped it out and everything. But then but no, I had really done no previous writing because when I had moved to the Intel side of the world, then I was reading and writing every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that there was just no like cognitive capacity to like try to address any like creative writing beyond that.
Sure.
Um, and then when I was in grad school, I actually did my master's thesis was pretty in depth. It was a couple hundred pages, and it focused on mostly the U.S. Army, but domestic military intelligence operations in the United States from 65 to 75, right?
Oh.
And so that just required just such, just pouring through like all the primary source documentation and finding the one microfiche reader that's still on island, like
Oh my
so that
God.
I was pretty burned out on the academic writing from all that, and that was because initially
I
I
can
thought like, oh,
imagine.
I'm going to turn this thing into like a like a pop history, and like that'll be my entree into the publishing world, and there was just really no interest for it, which I thought was weird. Post January 6th, this was kind of like the whole, all the militarization of the police and the deep state and all that stuff was like really kind of topic du jour. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, oh, people will be interested in this, right? Because this is the roots of like where a lot of those kind of concepts and assumptions came from.
Right.
But it was, I just didn't get any traction on it. So then I was just like, well, you know what? Now, I'm unemployed. Like I got the time. I might as well just try to knock this out. So that's when I wrote Baghdad Shuffle, and then was fortunate. I did some pretty kind of using my Intel background, did some really kind of targeted research on publishers that I thought would be a good fit. Because like I knew I didn't want to self-publish, and I didn't have an agent, so I was kind of going for that hybrid blend of like I just got to find like a smaller. I'm not no one from the big five is gonna. They're not into like unsolicited like niche crime military novels.
Yeah,
So
no,
it's not
that's
like
the same. I was going to
that's just not a
mention
thing.
about how
Yeah.
absolutely niche within a niche within a niche this is.
But fortunately, so I've been a fan of. I've been reading this guy James Stiskel, who was a retired Army SF guy and CIA paramilitary dude that had written some really fun thrillers. And I noticed that I was reading one called Dead Hand that he had published a few years back, and he had switched. Right, I noticed, oh, he's on a different publisher now, and I was like, Double Dagger Books, like never heard of these guys before. So I did some research and found out that it was actually founded by this guy Phil Halton, who had been a Canadian Army humanist, who had then branched out into the commercial world and had done some like kidnap for ransom negotiation stuff in Iraq, like private sector side. And I was like, oh, this is like an interesting dude. It seems like a cool company. I like looked at some of the other titles they had, and I was like, yeah. So, so this is another one where other authors are like get pissed when I say this, but yeah. So I cold pitched the manuscript to Double Dagger, and Phil basically hit me up like a day later and was like, hey, get on my schedule for a Zoom. We did the Zoom call maybe 2 or 3 days after that, and then I had the book deal,
Wow.
that day.
That's awesome.
So it was the very first publisher that I hit up. But like I say, I had done a lot of like,
Yeah.
preparation of the battle space, moving forward on that. So I just found they were a good fit. I found the right, that was it was the perfect place to be for kind of the initial run out the gate, because there was, they never tried to like influence any creative side of it or anything. Very receptive to it. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Go ahead, Nancy.
I was just going to ask, what advice do you have for, a veteran looking to have his or her book published and looking for the right publisher? What are some key takeaways that you learned?
Yeah, so the publishing industry has changed a lot from at least how I perceived it to be, right? So like growing up in the 80s and 90s and reading all these books, like, I thought that like you could just sit in a cabin somewhere, knock out a book, maybe do like one media appearance, and then like your publisher would take care of all the rest. And like that's not the case, And I've been fortunate enough to find one, at least on kind of the military thriller, espionage, crime side of the house, like other authors are extremely welcoming, right? So I've made some great friends through this process that I thought
That's awesome.
going into it would never give me the time of day, but like, we're willing to like blurb the book or provide feedback and help promote it and everything. So a shout out to Alana Berry, I.S. Berry. I don't know if you guys, she's a former CIA operations officer that wrote The Peacock and the Sparrow, which was like probably my favorite, spy novel of the past decade or so. But so that was a good example, right? So I kind of like, I had reviewed her book just on Instagram, and then tagged her on the thing, and then she wrote, oh, thanks for the for the review and everything. And then so it's just like a networking thing, which a lot of that I thought like the publisher kind of helped. There was I don't have like there's not a set, my Double Daggers doesn't have like a separate publicist assigned just to me, right?
Right,
so,
right.
Like, but I thought there was going to be like on the publishing side would do a lot more of that. And then I found, even folks that are signed to the Big Five or Big Three now, I guess, like back in New York, like that's they still have to do. There's a lot of hustle. It's a lot
Yeah.
of self promotion. You got to kind of learn, and I still suck at it, but you got to kind of learn the social media game, and the networking piece of that. So that would be my first piece of advice for prospective authors is know that it's not just writing books. It's also like all the stuff that you may have assumed a publisher would do. Like you're going to be doing that as well. But that's great. The second kind of heads up is like, yeah, it's obviously, it's a much more welcoming community. It's not the zero sum kind of dog eat dog thing I thought it would be. There's a lot of, kind of the barrier to entry to publication has been lowered, obviously. So that has expanded kind of the throughput or the volume of books, especially in the fiction side of the house that are out there. But that doesn't necessarily impinge on other people's sales and stuff. So it's kind of a counterintuitive. Like you would think that like people would become more competitive because there's so much more content out there now.
Yeah.
But it kind of seems to me that it's almost like the other way around, right? Because it's like there's because the market is so expansive.
With that sort of explosion, or I guess even the lowering of the bar, I guess a decade ago it was like sort of in vogue that you could just self-publish,
Mhm.
and then it seemed like a lot of folks were finding that wasn't quite as much. Like not everybody's going to be what's his name, Andy Weir, right? Like not everyone's going to write The Martian and self-publish it and have it turn into and so. It seemed like that's the sort of the zeitgeist for that sort of died down. Is that still an option for people?
Yeah, it is obviously.
Okay.
There's still people that are doing that and making money at it. I had been kind of warned by a couple folks early on. They're like, well, if you do self-publish, like the agents and the traditional publishers are probably not going to touch you, right? So you gotta kind of commit to that, for like a career.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it too is, I've seen, because it ties into the Hollywood piece too, right? Of getting, novels like optioned, because there's really no money in literature, right? I mean,
Right.
for every like, Jack Carr or whatever that's out there.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I told my wife, like, yeah, don't worry about it, baby. We can literally make tens of dollars like selling, hard-boiled crime novels. Yeah, so obviously like the optioning piece is like where the big bucks are still out there, right?
Mhm.
But when you have kind of these standalone, like Hollywood isn't really making a lot of like mid-budget like action dramas anymore. I mean, unless you get like the one Steven Soderbergh movie he does every 2 years or whatever. Like there's not a lot of people doing that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
If it's not tied to like an existing IP or something, it's that's going to be a tough gig. So I think that's where a lot of the people that used to just do like screenplays on spec or whatever, or like, if I didn't have opportunity to really get that out into the universe, maybe just transition to a self-published novel, and then hope it picks up some steam, and then kind of reattack on the back end. So I mean, and there's people that have done that. That's it's not impossible.
Yeah.
But to me, that just seemed like one. Fortunately, like with the pension and everything, I'm not like super hard up for for money, so it wasn't like I was a 25-year-old coming out of an MFA program where it's like, this is do or die. Like this is how I'm paying the rent.
That's right.
Which gave me the flexibility to kind of just like ease into it with a smaller publisher, and just kind of learn the ropes a little bit that way.
Within the publishing world, then, do you find that there is it seems like when you look at sort of the shelves, that there's a lot of like war memoir, like, hey, I was the guy who shot Osama bin Laden, or I was task force commander, blots and blots, and we did all this cool stuff. But in the fiction world, especially when you're talking like military noir, like you're talking like genre within a genre, did you find that the publishers are sort of veteran adverse? Like, what does this guy know about this thing? Or were they like, hey, very unique perspective, let's see what you got?
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, I think you're 100% on target there. As far as, again, I don't have the stats to back this up, but just anecdotally, it feels like nonfiction obviously sells way better than fiction these days, and dudes don't read fiction very much. So like pretty much, if you look at like the entire like fiction demographic, it is female dominated, right? From the readership side. Well, a lot from the authorship side as well, but like definitely from the readership side. So yeah, that's definitely a bit. So if you're writing something that, and not to pigeonhole it, hopefully I would like to think that Baghdad Shuffle appeals to men and women. beyond ones that were just veterans, right? But like
Hmm.
that can be like a hard sales pitch, to the publishers. They're thinking like, well, you're gonna write this really like hard boiled, profane, just kind of aggressive, like in your face. Like that's not the kind of the general like female like romantasy readership
Right.
that drives like huge sales numbers, right? Because that's kind of what's happening in the moment right now. So that's the thing. Yeah. So it's like if you're gonna do like the nonfiction memoir style route, that's one thing. Um, yeah, it's just I guess the kind of the lesson learned is just make sure you kind of what those target demographics look like
Yeah.
going into it, or so that you don't have like unrealistic expectations of like.
Yeah. So it really has more to do with genre than the author then.
I think so a lot. I
Okay.
mean, at least because like that's how you're going to get your foot in the door, right? So like whatever your tagline or your sales pitch is going to be before,
Yeah.
because especially if you're sending out like unsolicited manuscripts, right? Like that's if you don't have an agent that's not helping you kind of tailor that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big part. Is like how are you selling this? And if you look at like the tagline that I use with Double Dagger is basically what made it onto the back of Baghdad Shuffle. And it's like, yeah, that's a pretty niche thing. Like, there's not a lot of people that
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
super into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry that there's no like dragon sex or like dynasties competing over some sort of like that's just not my bag. But and that's
All right.
okay.
Well,
Like that. And I'm not like I'm not trying to shit on authors that have gone there. That's great. Good on them. Like I'm glad that people are because it does help the entire industry, right? When you have
Sure.
people that are selling
Yeah.
a million copies of that kind of stuff, now all of a sudden, then you get like, Barnes and Noble is opening more stores, and like, so it's good. It's good on the whole. It's just really trying to find like your niche and your kind of tailored approach. I think that can be daunting, for a lot of folks.
I want to bring this conversation more positive. You've made an accomplishment. You've written a book, and you're trying to sell the book, and we want to help you do so. What's your elevator pitch for it? I mean, based off the title, it could be interpreted multiple ways. So, like, give us our audience your sort of like your 5-minute Amazon elevator pitch.
Yeah, so that's the yeah. So really, it would come down to this, right? So it's Iraq 2003, Baghdad's burning. The regime is on the run, but there's a lot of money left behind, and then there's one Marine that gets tangled up in people that are clamoring for that money, and then that basically leads that series of events follows him back to Los Angeles, and then eventually down into Mexico, and it's just this is wild, it's almost like like I said, it's kind of like I used to play this parlor game of where you would try to take like these different conspiracies and events that have happened and then try to like make them all merge together. So yeah, it's kind of just
Ooh.
it's a mixtape of like early 21st century murder and conspiracy, but at a geopolitical level. So there's intelligence officers involved, there's military, there's federal law enforcement, there's Mexican cartels, there's a Corsican organized crime thing, which was actually a thing that I ran into later on in Iraq.
That's what I was
So it's
gonna
like
say
all
when
those
I
things.
was reading through it, especially the scene, like you said, the opening sequence with the bank and the police officers, and are these folks trying to tell us, like, setting us up for an ambush, or are they actually giving us the intel? And it felt very like that. As I was reading, I was like, this is definitely something he experienced almost firsthand and is drawing on. So then, get into the later on into the web and the intricacies. I'm like, I don't wonder how much of this stuff he actually had to get like vetted in order to publish. Because if one thing is based off of experience, I'm guessing there's other
Yeah.
things in there too.
Yeah, so it's like, I kept the tradecraft part of it pretty light. And that was hard too, right? Because I was trying to remember to like imagine how the protagonist, Jim Wild, he's a 25-year-old Marine infantry guy. Like he doesn't know necessarily the inner workings of like big intel that I was exposed to later in my career. So you have to kind of make sure that from a narrative standpoint, you unlearn some
Yeah.
of that, right? To make sure
Yeah.
that it rings true. But really, yeah. So the themes, it's the compulsion, absurdity, revenge, and then probably most importantly, humor, right? Like that was the one thing I kind of felt was missing because there's a lot in pop culture now, and this is probably something William that I probably should have put into the elevator pitch, but there's a lot of content out there that focuses like on, special operations and very like high end, like tactical, which is great. I love the terminal list. I love all that stuff too. Yeah, I'm a consumer. But there's been very few, at least from the early global war on terrorism days, that kind of focus on that 19-year-old grunt, right? And the thing that stuck out most to me about that kind of cohort and the voicing from that area was just like how funny fucking Marines are, right?
Yeah.
Like they're literally stuff that comedic gold that like no writer would ever be able to capture. And that's one thing, I did a really piss poor job of like taking any notes, or I didn't journal or anything like during the invasion in 03. And I probably missed a lot of that. So, a few of them I was able to kind of commit to memory and then repurpose them, for the Baghdad Shuffle. But there was just on a daily basis, there was just so many things that were like either through through dialogue or just through like their actions that were absolutely captured kind of that gallows humor that I think is kind of missing from a lot of the more earnest, kind of more serious, got to stop the terrorists from destroying the world type, super high end tier 1 mission type stuff, right? And that's what I was trying to get back to, because I think other conflicts have had a lot of that. Like obviously Vietnam, there's a ton of great novels that are predicated on kind of that viewpoint, right? And World War II, etc., Korea, but not as much for the early GWAT, for sure.
Do you have a favorite example of that kind of gallows humor, or a phrase or expression or situation that you tucked away for later?
Yeah, I did. So there's a couple. There's a few that are probably, even though I know it's adult podcasts, there's probably a few that may not be appropriate for putting out there. But there was one that I didn't put in the Baghdad Shuffle that took place during the same time of those events, right? And we had just crossed the Diyala River, so we're still south of Baghdad, and we were posted up, and there was a Iraqi intelligence service like headquarters building that had been abandoned, but we had set up a vehicle checkpoint there. And long story short, there was two what turned out to be IIS agents in a Mercedes that tried to run the checkpoint. And we had PFC Atherton, again, one of these guys that like I think he joined us in Kuwait from SOI or whatever. So so he greases them with the 50, and it literally like blew the guy's arm off and everything. And like the car is still smoking and it's just covered in gore, and it hasn't even stopped yet. It's like still kind of rolling against the barrier. And he turns to his vehicle commander, Corporal Menendez, and he's like, "Hey, Corporal, do you mind if I break out chow?" Actually, that was like the only thing he was focused on was the whole like chow was continuous. Like he was just wanting to like, "Hey, can I finally? Okay, I killed these guys. Can I eat now?" Like Jesus, like what? It's like, can you maybe like wait until till the car stops smoking and maybe we check these guys? But it was like the
cheese
perfect.
spread's got my name written all over it.
Exactly, the perfect encapsulation of like of the priorities of Marines at that age, right? So, or another one, there was a cigarette, and Vic, you might remember this, like. There was a cigarette factory and a beer factory that were like right south of Baghdad as well. And I remember our sergeant major, salty old bastard, like he had been completely Winchester on smokes for probably 3 days. And he was like a two pack a day kind of guy, right? So he was fiending hard by the time. And I remember seeing him jump out of the vehicle, and he like cleared that entire facility by himself and just comes out with that car and it's like, So again, it's just like the absurdity of like, if you look at those episodes like out of context, you're like, this is absolutely ridiculous, right? But like again, it just kind of shows like the priority and the humor of that goes into that.
Yeah, I remember when we were rotating everything back, so we're loading everything up on we were back in Diwania, I believe, and which we were calling ad diarrhea because everybody got dysentery there, and so we're loading everything back up, and then the inspectors, the ship, whoever, the cargo folks started noticing like a lot of illegal. So they send the word back up and like, hey, if you've got any contraband, like this is your one amnesty period. Anything else we find, we're going to, hold you fully to the UCMJ. And so they start talking about all of the stuff they're going to do if you get caught. And so they just had this pit. And they said, by tomorrow morning, all of your contraband needs to be in this pit. And that thing was a mountain. And I want to say one of the golden hands of like the Saddam statues was like in there. So some Marine like saw it broke off. It's like, yoink, this is mine now. But yeah, the craziest stuff was in there too. But anyhow.
Yeah,
Um,
those stories are great. I mean, especially the stuff that I did make it back to. I remember like the guy when we met out in Najaf, the guy that had been kind of the interim mayor that was holding the seat. You know, it was obviously Najaf is like majority Shia, but there was still like kind of a regime leftover dude, Sunni guy, you know,
mhm.
complete Ba'athist asshole that was still like, you know, running the show there. And he had lost a leg during the Iran-Iraq War, and so he had a prosthesis. And I remember that was like the main thing that everybody went like, that's going back in the 1-7, like, you know, back
Yeah.
in the hooch. Like we want that leg mount, that fake leg mounted. Just ridiculous,
Uh,
but funny.
well,
Yeah.
well, Josh, man, I really appreciate it. I do. Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. I wanted to ask you though, so not only are you a creative in as far as like, diving into the literary world, but you're also hosting a podcast,
Yep.
The Green Door. And I just want to clarify something. You were the first guest of the Green
I
Door, is that
was, and
correct?
then I got called up to the big leagues. So,
So you were so good as a guest that they
no,
brought you on, or was
I
that
don't think that
always the
has anything
plan?
to do with it. It was the I'm the co-host. The host is my buddy Rennie McPherson, who was another Marine Intel guy that I had was in Fallujah with, right? And then he's gone off to be, you know, super successful in the business world, and it's a business podcast essentially. I mean, at its root, and that's kind of so I'm woefully like underqualified to be co-hosting that thing, but I'm there for color commentary and to kind of ask the layman questions of like, you know, when they start broing down with all like the B school jive, like, hey, what does any of that mean? You know, what is a Series A? Like, what, you know, but it really focuses on military and intelligence community veterans that have moved into either the venture capital space or have done or founded startups themselves, right? That are like
Mhm.
security, defense tech related. So we're really looking at kind of the industry folks, the technologists, and then also we try to mix in a few creatives as well. So we recently had Ivan Ingraham, who's a
Yeah,
retired Marine Special
run
Operator. Yeah, so like
really
yeah, we
enjoyed
had
that one actually. Yeah.
so we had he just had a novel come out about a year ago called Once We Pledge Forever. So we had him on there for that. That was, you know, to try to break it up because it's like yeah, just doing the, you know, it's great. I learn a lot every episode. Obviously, I mean, there's some really phenomenal folks out there that are doing great things. We just interviewed two Army veterans that have started they're manufacturing drones in Tennessee now with like damn near 100% U.S. components. So I
Wow.
think
Wow,
yeah, it's
that's really
unbelievable.
cool.
Unbelievable. Like they still had to get, I think there was like one ball bearing that they have to get from Japan because that's the only place it's made or something.
It's
And
all
then there's like
barbarians these days.
some sort of like ore that they use for the magnets that doesn't exist in North America, so they have to import that. But like everything else is like, you know, is them. Um, so great, great success. We just interviewed in fact, it aired today, like the former chief technology officer of JSOC. This guy's
Oh,
Snehal Antani, really impressive guy that went on to form a AI company. And just the stuff that they're doing, kind of like AI in the targeting space and the counter hacking, and it's just unreal, right? Like
hmm.
the scope and the cadence at which those guys are and girls are creating that stuff, and it's great to see. You know, it's like
That's
someone
cool.
who they still living in a society where it's valued for innovation is still like rewarded and valued, and
Yeah.
people are actually, you know, doing shit, which is cool
Yeah,
to see.
What is your
I love
thoughts
that.
then? I know that you'd mentioned a little bit with your when you were talking to Ivan Ingraham. What are some of your thoughts about creatives in uniform or veterans recently recently holding their DD-214? But we give a lot of lip service to the young Marine, the innovation, the initiative, and all of these things. Where does creativity play in that, and what do you think the Marine Corps can do to cultivate that sort of creativity? Because there's such a stigma within all of us mouth breathers and knuckle draggers that, oh, creative means I can kill you better,
Yeah.
which is that's ultimately what we want to get to, right? But at the same time, like, the imagination isn't having an imagination isn't lame, right?
Right. Yeah, no, and I think, you know, that stigma, and sometimes I think works in good ways because it can filter out some of the pretenders, right? Like
Mm,
the truly creative people out there, they're going to create no matter what. No, it
yeah,
doesn't
good
matter
point.
like what you
Yeah.
throw in front of them, right? So I think it can be like a good kind of filtration system. Obviously, it can be taken to the extreme where because of the strictures of in the hierarchy of rank and everything, you can have some really good initiative that gets squashed at low levels. We don't want that. No Marine wants that. That's I think that's straightforward. Um, but at the same time, you know, it is like I say, it helps, you know, kind of find another path in a lot of cases, right? Like that was what I always said. Like, so when I had, most of my time on the intelligence side of the house was spent as a counterintelligence, human intelligence Marine. But I did have 1 or 2 gigs where I was essentially like a kind of like a senior analyst. And that was the main thing with the intel specialists that would like move into kind of like the analysis gig, the analyst gig, was if they had that kind of like it's kind of dog with the bone type, like they had to know, it was like that investigative like bias,
Yeah.
right? Like they had to know how things worked. Um, whatever kind of conspiracy or problem set that we were looking at, they absolutely couldn't let go. Like they had to get to the bottom of it. And I think that is really, that goes hand in hand with the creativity of like finding solutions, right? And really figuring out like what path, how they need to game the system, or they need to maybe play personalities off against each other to get something approved or whatever it is. Like that's really where you see a lot of that start to flourish. And a lot, as far as teaching that, it's tough. Like I don't, other than just trying to foster an environment where it's not getting squashed like every day. I don't, some of that, is it nurture nature? I'm not sure. Some of it's innate. I think some of it may kind of spring forth later in life sometimes. And that's, so that's it. It's a tough one as far as trying to cultivate that creativity. But I think, obviously recognizing it when it exists and then do what you can to support it is obviously helpful, and that should be the job of every leader, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, no,
I love that. I love that.
That's really good. And like you said, it's easier said than done, unfortunately. But you've had the benefit of being in a small unit that was out, alone and totally afraid, and also as a senior leader, being in multiple environments as an infantryman and then an intel officer. I know for me, a lot of times, because I was always the best, and so I always did it right, but everybody else was all fucked up. No, but it seemed like the rigidity of the chain of command, which I'm in full support of, obviously. It almost seems antithetical, though, to fostering environments of curiosity or enabling curiosity, because there is that middle management piece that was like, stop questioning me there, devil dog, just get it done.
That's because op tempo and time, like all that there are very real time constraints, and so like that's there can be a time when you run up against that, and that's for sure. But I think recognizing probably one of the piece of leadership advice that I've reflected on the most or used the most, I guess, in all my endeavors. And so Colonel Tim Oliver was, in my mind, probably one of the best Marine Corps intelligence officers of my generation for sure. But he was my boss several times, right? And we deploy, then come back, and we were still doing intel. You're still doing it like in garrison, right? And he used to be one of those guys. It's like, hey, don't be keeping the Marines here, till 2100 while you're in garrison every night to get the INSUM prepped for the boss tomorrow or whatever. Because like once you get into combat, you don't have that time. So you can't habituate yourself to having the luxury of just staying later to do it, right? Because in war, like deadlines are deadlines. And that has really kind of informed my approach to a lot of that, whether it's creative pursuits or whether it's trying to foster creativity in others, is make sure that there's, it really comes down to time management. And that's like when there is time to be able to reflect, introspection is hard, but like it can take a while to get there. But when there's time to practice and get in those reps and really try to like stretch that creative side of the brain, let the Marines do it. And then that's something that, again, it's easier said than done for sure. We've all been, the last half of my career was probably more than half was just as the staff guy, right? So like totally familiar with the salt mine, just grinding, trying to meet deadlines and just, getting product out and everything. I get it. That's a thing. But at the same time, like if you're a better time manager and you're optimizing the use of that time, that is going to expand the hours in the day that are left to really kind of sit back and focus on creative solutions, which are hard to do when you're juggling, you're rolling calls and juggling emails and stuff all day. That all that stuff is static. That's going to detract from that mission. So.
Yeah, if the alligators are inside the boat, it doesn't take a lot of creativity to be swinging at them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when you're fighting that 4-inch fight, it's
yeah. Well, Nancy, I think this is your time to shine.
Okay, it's my turn. This is my favorite question. I don't know if you got prepped on this, but this is my favorite question to ask.
I'm going in cold.
Okay. What was your best day in the Marine Corps?
Oh, wow. My very best day. It it might so on the eve we were in Kuwait, waiting for the war to kick off, right? At this point we kind of knew it was coming, we didn't know when. And we were actually technically I was actually already in Iraq because we had gone up to provide security for a radio battalion detachment to do like some SIGINT collection on Safwan Hill, which Vic, you probably remember being that big feature there that was right across the border. So we were actually technically had rolled in kind of the DMZ, like out of Abdullah Farms in the north, like into Iraq, got chased out by some UN guys. And then as we were setting back up, we got a call like, hey, come back to the LSA. And so we walked in there, and that was when my then company commander, who is now General Kyle Ellison, absolutely phenomenal leader. He called us in for like the rah-rah speech, right? Like, hey, we just got the word, boys, it's on, like we're going. And it was a great speech. I could tell he rehearsed it, like it was awesome. We were all like fired up. And so no sooner had he ended it, and it was like kind of that 1 second of kind of like awkward silence. And then my buddy Jimmy was like, so sir, does that mean Anne Margaret's not coming? And that's when I knew right then that like, yeah, these are truly my people. Like that is the environment that I need to be in. Folks that can maintain that sense of humor. I'm literally on like we're about to go into battle for the first, for most of us, it was our first time. It was about emotionally, it was about like the heaviest possible point. Because once you're in the fight, like you don't think about it as much, right? Because you're just kind of going, reacting and you're caught up in the mission. But that was truly the day when I was like, yeah, I chose right. These are the people I'm supposed to be with. This is what I'm supposed to be doing.
That's a great story. I love that.
That's awesome. Well, Josh, thank you so much for spending time with us. I don't know, Nancy, William, you guys got anything else?
No, I love that. And some great takeaways. I've been, stealing your quotes. So
great. Well, yeah. Also, and I will throw out there, I should have mentioned it earlier when we were talking about, but if there are any, any veterans or just any aspiring writers that I'll make sure you guys have my Proton Mail address.
Okay.
Feel free to hit me up. I can't promise that I can do like a content review or like a quick edit of any drafts, just because my stack is pretty high. But if not, I mean, I can at least try to provide some advice on, I do know a lot of like hungry young editors that work relatively cheap.
Yeah.
So I can at least maybe, point folks in the right direction and
that's
try to help
awesome.
them out.
That's very nice. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
We'll put that into the show description so that it hits all of the streaming services when this gets released. So
cool. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for this.
Very
This was
good.
great. It was a really fun conversation. So
Thank you.
Yeah, let's definitely stay in touch and we'll hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, if I can invite myself back, doesn't have to be the next one, but one of the future Semper Cinemas. I'm all about that. Let's talk some Marine movies.
You're talking our language. So
yeah, I take a very expansive view of what constitutes a Marine Corps movie. So like we were just having this discussion the other day. I was like, no, heat counts, right? Because Detective Hanna, he was a Marine before.
That's like I keep saying about Aliens. Aliens is a Marine Corps movie.
So was The Godfather. Hello.
That's right.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, we will definitely be in touch then. Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, you're gonna send us an email. Let us know like give us some top things to choose from.
Okay.
Yeah, some titles.
Yeah.
Certainly will do.
All right, Josh. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Scuttlebutt is a production of the Marine Corps Association. You have heard the voices or contributions from Major Vic Rubel, USMC retired, Nancy Litchman, William Truding, and our guest. Ty Frazier is the editor, sound engineer, and technical producer. The Marine Corps Association is not an agency of the U.S. government. The opinions expressed in this episode are the personal views of the participants and do not reflect the official position of the United States Marine Corps, the Department of Defense, or the Marine Corps Association.